Good day, Scratch fans. This is Bill Stannard from EngiLearning at the St. Louis Science Center with another of our EngiLearning sessions, this one entitled Pong Game with AI. And you notice this time we have two paddles. The red one on the left is the paddle belonging to the computer. Let's see how clever this computer is. Computer just scored because I didn't have my green paddle in the right spot. So let's see if I can get up here. It's going to bounce. Oh, another score. Better get on it down. Okay, now that's a little bit better. So you can see the computer is figuring out where the ball's going to be. Let's go ahead and build this game and see what it looks like. I'm going to go back and I'm going to start with the original game that we built last time, and that is the regular Pong game. Okay, I'm going to start with my Pong game, but I'm going to change it and add some AI, so I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to come up here to File, and I'm going to save as a copy. And notice now that the name of the game is Pong Game Copy. Okay, and I'm going to change it to Pong Game with AI 2. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new score variable for the computer. So I'm going to come over here to where the variables live, and I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to click on the block, make a variable, and I'm going to call it computer score. Click OK. And I'm going to move my score, originally my human score, over to the right and move computer score up here a little bit. And I'm going to change the name of what used to be called score to human score. So I'm going to just type human and put a space in there. So now we have human score on this side and computer score on this side. I'm in the ball code right here. I've clicked here. You can see the ball sort of fuzzy up here. And I'm going to get rid of this whole block of code because I'm going to rewrite it. Okay, this whole block of code. So I'm going to just take it off the set. And there we go. And I am going to rewrite some code here. I'm going to start with the green flag as usual. Drag it over here. And at the beginning of the game, I want to set both of my scores to 0. So I'm going to come down to variables, and I'm going to set my computer score to 0, and I'm going to set my human score to 0. So I drag them both over and I change this one to human score. So now I have my human score set to 0 and my computer score set to 0. And I want the ball to start in the center. I want it to start at 0, 0. So I'm going to come over here to motion, and I'm going to have my go to XY, and I'm going to set it to 0 and 0. Okay, so this is at the start of the game. And in this case, because I am going to be moving back and forth from right to left, left to right, rather than up and down, I want the direction of the ball to start off at 80. So I am going to click down here where it says direction, and I'm going to change that to 80 and hit enter. And I'm going to grab the point in direction block over here, and I'm going to change it to 80. So that's how it's going to start. Okay, I'm now going to move my paddle over to the right side of the screen. And I want to tip it on its edge so that it's going up and down rather than horizontally. And I'm going to do that by clicking on Direction, taking the arrow, and moving it to 0 degrees. Okay. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, and I'm going to change the name of the paddle from just paddle to human paddle, because we are also going to have a computer paddle. So there's the human paddle. I'm going to get rid of this coding block right here because I'm going to give it some new code. So I'm going to drag this off the screen, and I'm going to move my paddle all the way over to this edge. Okay, and we're going to write some new code for it. And we're going to start with the green flag. And at the beginning of the game, I wanted the paddle to be over here. So I'm going to go to Motion. And I'm going to drag in this block. And I'm going to say that I want to have it at 230, which is where it is. It's all the way over against the right wall. And 0. So I'm going to type a 0 in there. So at the beginning of the game, that's where the paddle is going to be. And now I want to create some code inside of a forever loop because it's a game and we have to keep checking and checking and checking. And I want to give some code to that paddle so I can move it up and down. And this time I'm going to move it up and down using arrows rather than the mouse. So I am going to use an if statement, and I'm going to build it out here, and then I'm going to put it inside of the forever. And I'm going to see if the up arrow is pressed. That's sensing, so I'm going to click on sensing, and I'm going to grab key pressed. And I'm going to put it in here, and I'm going to change space to up arrow. And if the up arrow is pressed, I want to move my green paddle up. So that's a movement, a motion. I'm going to scroll down here, and I am going to change my Y by 7. In other words, I'm going to move up 7 pixels. So that's if the up arrow is pressed. What if the down arrow is pressed? Well, let's go get a block that will ask that question. So here we go. If this one says up arrow, so let's go get a sensing block, and we're going to check to see if the down arrow is pressed. So we're going to put that in here. Change it to down arrow. And if it is, I want to change the Y by, in this case, -7. In other words, I want it to go down. Okay, so I'm going to change Y by -7. -7. Okay, now that we have those built, I'll put them inside the forever loop. So that's what it should look like. Okay, so let's see if that actually works. I'm going to go ahead and click on the green flag, and I'm going to use my up arrow, and look at that. It goes up and it goes down by pressing my arrows. You can assign these to any keys you like. You could use the keys over on the left-hand side of your keyboard where you use W and S for up or down. But I thought it was a little bit easier if we just use the arrows. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ball code again. And we have a big chunk of code here. Go ahead and stop this. And I'm going to get rid of all of this code because I'm going to rebuild it. So I'm going to grab this, drag it off to the side, and it disappears. And now we're going to add some code. And the first thing I'm going to put in there is a green flag. And you know what I'm going to put next. I'm going to put a forever loop. Okay, one of the things I want to check on is the position of the ball. I want to always know where the ball is in terms of up and down. In other words, along the y-axis. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create another variable. And this one I'm going to call ball y. And you'll see as we go along that I am going to always keep track of where the ball is along the y-axis. Notice up here that ball y shows up on the screen. I don't really need to see it, so I'm going to come over here and uncheck that. Now, ball y is still being collected. That information is still being collected, but I just don't see it on the screen. Okay, so when the game starts, I want to move the ball 5 steps. Okay, so it reads 10 now. I'm going to put a 5 in there. And if the ball hits an edge, I want it to bounce. So I'm going to look for that. That's down here a little bit. If on edge, bounce. Okay, so far so good, like any other Pong game. And I want to set that variable. Okay. And what do I want to set it to? I want to set it to the y position of the ball. Well, to get that, I'm going to go to Motion. And if I scroll down to the bottom, I can find y position. So I'm going to set the variable ball y to the y position. And now I'm going to do some scoring. Let's figure out the scoring. If the ball hits this wall and is not stopped by the paddle, that should be a score for the computer. And if the ball hits this wall and is not stopped by the computer paddle, which we'll build in a little bit, that should be a score for the human. So let's think about how we're going to build that. First of all, if it hits the wall, well, that tells us we need an if statement. So here we go. We're going to bring out an if statement. Now, rather than talking about it hitting the wall, let's see how far over it is. If we pull it over to here, we can now see that its x position, in other words, along the x-axis, is around 221. Okay, maybe 222. So I'm going to say if the ball is, if its x position is less than minus 222, because you notice that's a minus. So if we're going to be doing less than, that's an operator. Let's grab a less than. Okay, so if the ball position, so that's ball Y, if the ball's X position is less than minus 222, so let's go up to the ball's X position is less than minus 222. How do I know it's 222? Because I kind of played around with it and experimented. So I'm now going to put that in there. So if the ball's X position is less than minus 222, let's give the human score another point. So I'm going to come over here and I am going to change the human score. I'm going to click on this little down arrow here and pick human score. I'm going to change it by 1. Okay? So I'm going to add that inside of here. Now I'm going to grab another if statement, and I'm going to build it inside this time. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say if the X position is greater than 222, then I'm going to give the computer score a +1. So come over here to operators, greater than. Okay, I'm going to look for X position. Greater than 222. Drag that inside of here. And I am going to change the computer score by 1. So now I have a nice scoring routine set up. Okay, let's go ahead and create a computer paddle. So we'll do that by coming over here to choose a sprite. I'm going to type paddle. And I'm going to choose that. Now I'm going to rename it computer paddle. Okay, and I'm going to change its color. So I've clicked on it down here. I'm going to come over to its costume, and you'll see it's green, just like the other paddle. And I want to change its fill and its outline. So I'm going to go first of all to the fill, click on the color, drag the slider under color all the way over to red, and I'm going to make it very red. Okay, so now if I get the paint bucket and I click there, I've turned the inside of it red. I need to do the same thing with the outline. And now I'm going to click on the select arrow, because if you don't do that, you'll find it very difficult to grab the inside of this. So there we go. I now click on it. Okay, you see I've clicked on it. I now go up to outline color, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move it over to red. Okay, so now the entire paddle is red. I'm going to go back to code here. I'm going to drag this paddle over to this wall, and I'm going to change its direction by clicking down here in direction. And I'm going to change it from horizontal to vertical, and this will be 0. Sometimes it's easier just to come down here and type a 0 in than trying to move the little arrow over. And I'm going to drag it over here and put it next to that wall. Okay, so it's very similar position to the green paddle. Okay, so let's, now that we have a computer paddle, let's go back to the ball and write some code that will bounce the ball off of either one of these paddles. So what I'm going to do is move this code kind of up out of the way here and scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to put my new code down here. So the first piece is always the same, the green flag. And in this case, I want it to go on forever. So that's a control. And I want to find out if the ball is touching the human paddle or the computer paddle. So that sounds to me like an if statement. So I'm going to drag that in here. And notice it's an if statement with an or. If this is happening or that is happening, we want to do something. So I need to go find an or, and I'm going to find that under operators. And you'll see there is an and there's an or. I'm going to grab the or and put it in there. So I'm now going to be looking for one of two things. Okay? And what I want to find out is if I am touching, I being the ball, if I am touching either one of the paddles. So I'm going to put the first one in there. If I am touching the human paddle, or touching again. If I am touching, I'm going to move this over a little bit. If I am touching the computer paddle, what do I want to have happen? Well, if the ball is traveling in a particular direction, I want it to reverse its direction. And the way you do that in most computer games is if it's going in a positive direction, you change it over to a negative direction. If it's going in a negative direction, you change it to a positive direction. And the easiest way to do that is multiply whatever direction it's going in by -1. So we're going to multiply. I'm going to come over here and grab an operator. And you have to look kind of carefully and make sure you get the multiplier, which is the third one down. Okay? So I'm going to grab the multiplier. And I'm going to take the direction the ball is going in. That's a motion. So I'm going to scroll down and grab the direction. And I'm going to multiply that direction by -1. So I'm going to click inside this space and put in a -1. So whatever direction it's going in, I want it to reverse its direction. Okay, so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to point in a direction. And what direction do I want to point in? I'm going to point in whatever direction it's going in times -1. Okay, so now when it hits one of those paddles, it should bounce off in the other direction. Let's give it a try. There it goes. Good. Okay, it seems to be, is it going to hit the paddle? No, it's just going to miss the paddle. Okay, so right now we have it bouncing off the paddles, but we need to move that computer paddle so that it actually has some intelligence. So let's go to the computer paddle, and now let's go ahead and write some code. So we're going to start off with, guess what? The green flag. And the first thing I want to happen at the start of the game is I want this paddle to line up where it is on that wall. So I'm going to go to Motion, and I'm going to grab the Go To. So I want it to be at minus 230, and I want it to be in the center. So instead of minus 18, I'm going to put in 0. Okay, so that's at the beginning of the game. And then whatever happens from now on, I want it to go on forever. So I'm going to grab a control block of forever and put that over here. And if this ball is up here and the paddle is down here, I want the paddle to travel up so that when the ball gets there, the paddle is lined up to hit it. So one way of saying that would be, if the ball's Y position, that's up here, is greater than the paddle's Y position, then I want the paddle to move up. So we're going to need an if statement. Okay? And we're going to need a greater than. Okay? So we're going to ask if the ball's Y position, guess what? We have a variable for that. So here is the ball's Y position is greater than the Y position of the paddle. We can find that over here under Motion. Scroll down towards the bottom. There's the Y position. Okay, so we're now going to put that in here. We want the paddle to move up. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the Y position of the paddle, and we're going to change it by 7. Okay, so we can put that in there. Let's build another one. If the Y position of the ball is less than the Y position of the paddle, we want the paddle to move down. Okay, we can do that. So let's get an if. And again, if the Y position of the ball is less than, so we need a less than operator. And we need the variable ball, Y. If it's less than the Y position of the paddle, we want it to move down. So we are going to change the Y position, and we are going to change it by -7. So let's see if that works. We'll just start it. And look at that. The paddle is following the Y position of the ball. Hands off. It's doing it itself. You've just created a self-driving paddle. Now, one of the problems in this game is, can you ever beat the computer? Because that computer is going to follow that ball no matter where it goes. Well, that's it, Scratch fans. This has been Bill Stannard from Yes, EngiLearning at the St. Louis Science Center with another of our EngiLearning sessions titled Pong Game with AI. Before I say goodbye, do not forget to save your project with its correct name. And in this case, it's Pong Game with AI. Make sure you save it that way. Bye now, and see you in the next lesson.